comments. And the first one that I have is Dr. Glenn Phillips. Are you on?
I am.
And then just if you could please declare any potential conflict of interest before your remarks.
Certainly. Yeah, and thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I'm Glenn Phillips, an employee of argenx, and I have no other conflicts to disclose beyond that. I'd like to thank Icer for reviewing the treatments of MG and highlighting the burden of this condition for people diagnosed with MG and their caregivers. The burden of this condition has not been well characterized, and we have learned much about its significant impact through interactions with patients and their caregivers. We at argenx are thankful to the MG community for their input to help us better understand how they are impacted. As in most rare diseases, limited literature hampers the ability to accurately characterize the burden of MG and the ability to conduct comprehensive value assessment of MG treatments. We believe that value frameworks such as those used by Icer are important to determining the value of medicines and what they bring to the patients and the healthcare system, but they must be applied carefully. Given present limitations, it is premature for Icer to conclude that efgartigimod is not cost-effective. We hope Icer will consider updating this review when further data is available to better characterize the value of efgartigimod. Additionally, we urge Icer to consider the following points. A limited literature and treatment options available in MG impacts the review in several ways. In many rare conditions, there are limitations on the data on both clinical effectiveness and the burden of MG due to small populations and heterogeneity of disease. Patients report significant impact to their quality of life and ability to work, often leading to significant financial struggles. As we've heard earlier, women are often affected at younger ages and not only impacting their careers, but also potentially delaying or even preventing childbearing. Additionally, some patients will suffer a potentially fatal respiratory complication that requires hospitalization and extended recovery times. Most commonly used MG treatments don't have a regulatory label and very limited published data. The lack of data on the full burden of MG and published data on commonly used treatments hampers the clinical review and requires many assumptions in the cost-effectiveness modeling, making it somewhat speculative. The situation means the manufacturers of novel treatments are fighting against ghosts in this type of review and sets up an unmet need trap, wherein the cost-effectiveness is rated incrementally to very cheap comparators that have very limited proven efficacy. The willingness to pay for treatments for rare diseases is underestimated. The price recommended in economic reviews for rare disease treatments are rarely consistent with rates reimbursed in the real world. In MG specifically, 2 current off-label treatments are reimbursed at rates that Icer suggests are not cost-effective, and a currently available on-label treatment is reimbursed for a small subset of MG patients at a much higher rate than Icer indicates is cost-effective. This suggests a greater willingness to pay for these treatments than Icer allows for. Much has been written about appropriate cost per quality thresholds. An earnest review and consideration of appropriate thresholds is warranted given the wide disparity between Icer's suggested prices and the amounts reimbursed. Prices suggested by Icer are unrealistic to support drug development in rare diseases. It is very expensive to develop rare disease treatments at well over $500 million and frequently more than $700 million to bring a novel treatment to market. The companies that develop these treatments want to help these patients, but to continue to develop a rare disease treatment, the companies must be profitable. Icer's suggested prices for most rare diseases is a disincentive to pursuing drug development. And it begs the question, what is the cost effectiveness of a drug not developed? The full value offered by novel treatments is often not reflected in these reviews. The individualized dosing approach for efgartigimod in our ADAPT family of trials was implemented at the behest of patients that we spoke with before the trial. And we expect it will offer a naturally value-based approach to treatment. Patients will only receive treatment when needed to control MG, and payers will only pay for the necessary treatments. Additionally, most value frameworks ignore the value of patient services offered by pharma and biotech companies. Patients with conditions like MG that have had limited approved treatment options have generally not had the opportunity to benefit from such services. At argenx, we will offer many services, including reimbursement support, remote patient monitoring, information on site of care and community support options, and case management services. recognize the value of these services would better reflect the total offering associated with treatment of interest. We want you to know how deeply committed argenx is to the MG patient community. Even well beyond our clinical trial investment, we have invested in My Real World MG, a large international real-world data collection effort enrolling patients from 9 countries to better understand and characterize the burden of this disease. We are learning from this effort the very real impact that MG has on patients and their loved ones. In conclusion, we encourage Icer to consider today's conversation not prematurely conclude that efgartigimod is not cost-effective. Given limitations in available data on the burden of MG, that efgartigimod is not yet available, the limited data that provides a real comparison to relevant treatments, and the real impact of individualized dosing, the findings of the current review are speculative and should be framed as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Can I move on to Tammy Boyd, who is the Chief Policy Officer and Counsel of the Black Women's Health Imperative?
No, I'm sorry. Jason, would you let the Icer team respond?
Yes.
Responses, please.
Yeah. Given the
We have time.
given the nature of the comments about the report, does someone from the Icer team want to respond to the comments?
All right, I will. Thank you for your comments. A couple quick points. One is that we obviously, Icer reviews are very sensitive also to any distinctive nature of the innovation pipeline and process for orphan drugs, which now account for over 50% of new drugs produced. So what in the old days used to be a rarity, which was a drug for a rare disease, is now the more common approach. And that is part of what I think, Dr. Phillips, you might agree is part of what is creating an unsustainable platform for innovation and for access in the US. And we have to be careful from our perspective, not to assume that what is what ought to be. And that goes for coverage as well as for pricing. What is not the way it necessarily should be. And so we'll talk about more about this on the policy roundtable, but I would emphasize that, among our recent reports, 9 orphan drugs have been found to be cost effective at their price, including the most expensive drug in the world for another neuromuscular condition, which we said was cost effective at $2.1 million. So it's not like the price can't be high. And we know that it is funding a lot of great innovation, but it's putting that into the context again of the broader health system and how we can create a platform that is good both for innovation and for access that is part of our goal. So I'm sorry we don't have time for much back and forth on this because we'll have more of this at the roundtable, but I wanted to provide a little bit of perspective on that. So Jason, thank you. We can probably proceed.
Sorry, I actually was trying to jump in as well.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that even though we and Dr. Phillips disagree on the cost effectiveness of this therapy, he and his team were incredibly gracious to Icer, providing their time and expertise out of proportion to almost any pharmaceutical group we've worked with. And I really wanted to thank him and his team on behalf of Icer.
And I'd say thank you. We actually really enjoyed the interaction.
Thank you both so much. And I will now move to Tammy Boyd, who's the Chief Policy Officer and Counsel of the Black Women's Health Imperative.
Yes, good morning. My name is Tammy Boyd, Chief Policy Officer and Counsel for the Black Women's Health Imperative. Black Women's Health Imperative was founded in 1989, and we are a national organization dedicated to improving the health and wellness of the 21 million Black women and girls in the US. I want to acknowledge that BWHI has appreciated Icer's engagement and initiative to more fully incorporate the lived experience of Black women and girls in its reviews. The structures across healthcare, housing, education, and employment, and food security have created inequities. We believe that Icer can and should be proactive to ensure that its reviews and reports do not have the unintended effect of widening disparities in access to care and health outcomes. The development of and access to new MG treatments is a BWHI priority because Black women and girls living with this disease can face near insurmountable burdens on their ability to function in the workplace and at home. We ask that the voting panel carefully consider our concerns with the evidence report and its shortcomings in capturing the lived experience of Black women and girls as it assesses the long-term value of MG treatments. First, Icer's extremely high cost per quality for new MG treatments looks like an assumption that these treatments have a minimal impact on quality of life and day-to-day function for MG patients. Patients on the new treatments describe the difference in their ability to function as night and day. BWHI also wants to emphasize that the substantial race and sex differences in severity, age at the disease onset, symptom burden, and response to older treatment options are critical to any assessment of value. Icer mentioned that these issues have been addressed appropriately in other benefits and contextual consideration sections, but did not account for any of these issues in their model inputs. Black women and girls with MG have just a 20 to 40% chance that older treatments will work well enough that they are able to work or raise a family. And the early age at onset can make it impossible to complete high school, much less fulfill aspirations of a college degree and career. The bottom line is that poorly controlled MG in young Black women can force them to a lifelong struggle for economic viability, social inclusion, and health in a world where the deck is already stacked against them. We understand that Icer did not account for work productivity or caregiver burden in its utility values due to lack of research linking treatment improvements to improve productivity. No one expects that Icer would be able to account for these factors with precision. So the question really boils down to acceptable magnitude of error. Excluding these factors is in of itself a determination that gains in productivity for patients responding to these treatments is zero. We provided literature sources with data on the substantial disease burden and productivity impact on refractory generalized MG, and it's implausible to imagine that the symptom control would not result in productivity gain. For BWHI, this is an extremely important issue because, one, Black patients are younger and due to age and the impact of systemic racism on economic opportunities are more likely to be limited to employment opportunities with less flexibility and greater physical demands. Uncontrolled MG-related fatigue and muscle weakness can make it impossible to maintain employment in these jobs. Two, women of childbearing age often face exacerbations that coincide with their menstrual cycles. This factor would almost certainly impact productivity. It also distinguishes the disease in women from that in men and underscores the disproportionate burden on Black women and is not considered in Icer's review. We appreciate that Icer acknowledged the impact of MG on delayed childbearing potential, particularly in Black women. For individuals, having and raising children is one of the defining factors in life. We doubt that any research will accurately quantify the quality value associated with being a mother. For determining whether treatments are worth the money without incorporating this utility devalues goals that are unique to women. While we appreciate that Icer has acknowledged the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, we view it as a real world factor with an unforeseeable trajectory that can make access to new treatments as a matter of life and death. This is extremely important to us given that both MG and the COVID-19 pandemic exact disproportionate burdens on the Black community. MG patients have more severe COVID disease and infection can exacerbate MG symptoms. Finally, BWHI remains concerned that Icer review does not incorporate real world information on how these treatments are used and the impact they have on patients. We understand that there is little in the way of published data, but hope that Icer will reach out to MG experts to get a clearer idea of what the newer treatments reduce use of steroids, decrease frequency of exacerbations and MG crises, and have durable impact on symptoms. This is of a huge importance to Black women and girls since it appears that MG clinicians really are hesitant to prescribe the high-dose steroids and immunosuppressive medications that are Icer's comparator in young women due to concerns with the consequences of long-term use. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. Maybe if we could just hear briefly from the Icer team, given the comments about the modeling.
Thank you to Tammy and team again for engaging with us. I'll probably let Dan talk a little bit about the model. But I just wanted to say that we really do appreciate the information you gave us. It certainly helped us to produce a richer report. And some of these things we captured, while we may not have put a number on this because we didn't have the data, it's part of the reason why we highlighted them so much in the report. And these are some of the things that the panel will take account of as they consider the overall value of these drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for your comments. I really appreciate the comments and think that they are valid. I'll address two of the comments. One is that younger patients receiving these drugs may benefit to a greater extent. Actually, both comments are about that. The first is that because these therapies are chronic therapies, the cost of the treatment would continue through that entire process. And so there would not be a difference in cost effectiveness related to when the treatment occurs. However, a very important consideration that you brought up is the impact on individuals and not considering the societal impacts, the societal costs. We did review the data that was provided, and we greatly appreciate your providing that information. Unfortunately, it was not in a format that was possible to incorporate those results in the model. However, we do acknowledge, and it is a significant limitation of the analysis, that it is likely that there would be benefits from therapy on some of those costs. The question is really how much benefit, and what are those costs in a way that could potentially be brought in to the model. And because we had so little data on this, it was really difficult. Anything we would have done would have just been a complete guess. And so I think the way we approached it was to acknowledge that that is a limitation of the analysis, and hope that there are researchers out there who are willing to undertake these important questions.
Thank you so much. And then I'm going to move on now to the next public comment, which is Wendy Huff. And I'll just give you a heads up. We are running behind again, so I'm just going to give you a 30-second warning so that you can wrap up your comments at 5 minutes. But the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Again, I'm Wendy Huff, Vice President of Programs and Clinical Care with the Myasthenia Gravis Foundation of America. There are no updates to our conflict at this time. I want to thank you for your kind condolences of our beloved Nancy Law. I want to extend my thanks for the opportunity to present public comments on behalf of the MG community and MGFA. Our mission is to create connections, enhance lives, improve care, cure MG. We deliver this mission through the modalities of research, education, and advocacy. This review is our first opportunity to engage with Icer and its process. We appreciated the opportunity to collaborate with Icer by conducting patient interviews to gain real evidence and insights to the lived experience of MG patients. It's important to note that we share Icer's goal of ensuring that all patients have access to medications they need and know that high costs of healthcare can make this goal impossible. Unfortunately, this challenge has been demonstrated with patients needing treatments, unable to get access because payers won't cover, as well as high out-of-pocket costs are just extremely difficult to reach in terms of affordability. We ask that Icer break this cycle, remove the barriers, and create opportunities for access to specialists, effective treatments, insurance coverage, and resources to improve the policy landscape in MG. We are closing in on the second year of this pandemic, and myasthenic patients express a greater concern for their well-being. In an already immunocompromised population, COVID-19 has added an extra burden to MG. It's imperative the patients have treatment options that control MG without reducing or eliminating vaccination effectiveness. To mitigate these risks, we ask the research and development teams to consider this COVID burden in future clinical trial design. We believe that Icer can achieve a result that more accurately reflects real-world experience of patients and true impact of these new treatments by considering MG exacerbations and crisis are different for every patient. There is no one-size-fits-all formula, and more options are needed, including greater granularity on disease burden from published sources to include the use of our MG registry, and including utility values for productivity, caregiver burden, fatigue, delayed childbearing, and other key factors in MG as its treatment options from either patient-reported information or similar chronic diseases with robust data utilities. We urge Icer to consider divergence in MG impacts productivity between women in their peak years of childbearing and income potential years. This divergence is more than contextual. It can be a driver in determining if an individual can meet their educational, income, and potential goals, and especially for life goals. Just as important, we need to clearly consider the differences between disease burden, responses in treatment, age, and race. Healthcare inequities are more acute in underserved communities and disproportionately impacts communities of color. The challenges are far steeper to gain access to treatments, insurance coverage, and also a timely or accurate diagnosis. The lack of diversity in clinical care remains woefully underrepresented. These factors contribute to systemic and perpetual cycle of poor health outcomes and higher mortality rates in African Americans. That must be addressed and to develop sustainable solutions. In closing, we ask that Icer value the burden of MG and bridge the gap between effective treatments, affordable drug prices, and adequate insurance coverage. Our patients and caregivers need hope now. Hope to be independent, energetic, and empowered to live the lives by their own design. We ask Icer to prioritize the voice of the patient to proactively change the course of this disease and overall impact on MG patients, caregivers, and families. Thank you for the opportunity to share the patient insights and perspectives in MG.
Thank you, and thank you for being precisely 5 minutes. I didn't have to do the warnings. Thank you. Next is Kevin Kimball. Is Kevin Kimball here? I'm having trouble. I can't tell if he's.
Yeah, can you hear and see me now?
We can hear you. Oh, we can hear
Okay,
and see you now. Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks. Well, Jason, I'll be merciful and I won't take up my whole 5 minutes. So, good morning to everyone, and thank you for inviting me and allowing me to speak today. My name is Kevin Kimball. I am the DC Bureau Chief of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and I'm also the Executive Director of their Global Policy Initiative here in Washington, DC. Many of you may know SCLC is an organization committed to civil rights from its founding in the 1950s by Dr. King as a result of the Montgomery bus boycotts. We tend to engage in lots of conversations about racial justice and inequities. And some 3 years past the 50th anniversary of the Poor People's Campaign, we are concerned that the fate of Black America is not improving. For today's discussion, I think, simply put, health is such a huge function of the Black community, and the ability to work and to have economic empowerment is rooted in healthcare. And when we looked at this particular issue, I was sort of concerned, and after watching some of the testimony today, that Icer would or could make a determination that a drug was not cost effective based on the limited data it had and the limited information that it was able to secure in the process. So first, to the researchers, the control group was problematic. The average age of the women in the group was 44, men was 54. And we know that African-American women catch the disease much earlier. So understanding how they could actually make a determination based on that number was problematic for us. What we really would like to ask is that Icer, take more time, take in more information. Everyone's spoken on this earlier, so I don't want to belabor or repeat too many things, but we don't believe Icer is doing justice to a group of women, particularly African-American women, whose lifelong journey is going to be hampered by the inability to get cutting-edge drugs. A 25-year-old woman, African-American woman who's yet to bear children with a life expectancy of 50 to 60 or 60 to 65, the quality, if quality doesn't value her life, then there's a problem with quality, right? And that is something that we at SCLC understand, that the rules can always be set against you if we're not careful. And we very much would like to talk to continue this conversation with you and others about how we can improve the way Icer takes advantage of the data that's out there. I mean, we need to engage physicians. Many African Americans live in healthcare deserts. They don't get the proper care. And if at the beginning of the process, the rules are set so that they can't get high quality drugs, then what is their quality of life? And what is the purpose of the drug if we can't improve the quality of life of these young people? Again, I had a long statement, but everyone has kind of covered it. I would like to say that we want to pass along our condolences for the loss of Ms. Law to Ms. Huff and her colleagues. And again, thank you. I'll be glad to answer any questions or engage in any way possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your very helpful comments. Is the Icer team available to respond to any of this?
Yes.
Before I ask for questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, very much for your comments. Those points you raised, I think these are very, very important points for us to highlight and even have more conversation about. And I believe some of these things will come out during our policy roundtable later this afternoon. I think these points are important ones for us to highlight. Specifically for our model, I know that we had focused on the age of the patients that were enrolled in the clinical trials. Again, we always welcome opportunities to make sure as much as possible we're reflecting what is happening in the real world. And so these comments are important for us to elevate, and even just for future research, as even more drug developers even enroll patients in their clinical trials.
May I ask one question? Also, I noticed that in the analysis, it didn't talk about the racial makeup of the control group.
So I believe for the model, Dan had presented that about 71% of, for the racial breakdown. I don't think we had that data. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we have that data presented.
That's correct. We did not have information on the racial breakup of patients in clinical trials.
Jeff, is that accurate in terms of the clinical?
In the ADAPT trial, we do have a race ethnicity breakdown. It was around 10% Asian, 4% Black or African American, the vast majority, around 85% white, and around 4% other.
Again, I know that's one of the points that Jeff had highlighted during his presentation as areas of limitation, and that we don't have good data on the non-white population. That's part of the reason why we're making space to elevate these important subgroups that we need more data on.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you both.
Jason, did you mean to mute yourself?
I did not. Thank you.
There you go.
Did ever hear what I said or no?
No, I
Oh,
think you
okay.
said
Thank you.
And then I have a feeling you were about to send us off to lunch and come back.
You were right. We are 8 minutes into lunch, but I just wanted to very briefly give the CEPAC a chance to maybe ask one quick question if needed. Otherwise, I will let everyone have lunch. Okay, hearing none, we will take a break for lunch, and we will plan to return at 12:50. Thank you all so much.
Got it. Thank you.